How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Hey everybody, Christopher McSweeney here to go through the start of lesson 2, which is 3 mini lessons on content assessments and feedback. And so this video is about content. So the thing that I love about the asynchronous model is the intentionality that it brings, because you're putting all of your content out at once, or at least as much as you can, for your students to start consuming and learning. And so you have to not just put out the content, not make it available, but you have to make it available in an order that makes sense. And so that's kind of our big focus. Mostly I have questions for you, and I'll just give you a little history of things that I've done in the past that were really helpful. Now, unfortunately, I've never been able to do this as a team because of my teaching history. I was usually by myself, or at least kind of operating by myself. And so I always had to do this part alone. I highly recommend that if you can, avoid that, because the more people you can get involved, the more kind of eyes and ears and brains you have thinking about how your students are going to go through that and experience that content order. So get as many people as you can without making too big of a crowd, but work in a team of people who understand students, understand what you're trying to do to help order your content. First, I'm just going to throw out some questions for you to start thinking about as I explain how I kind of have done this over the past few years in ordering my content. There's still some changes, still some areas where I'm like, man, I wonder if it would be better to teach, regular verbs first instead of teaching ser and star because they're irregular, things like that. That's where I go. What's the optimal way to teach this? So still some areas even 6 years later as I've been doing this, but here's some questions for you. How do you decide what's important to teach? How do you order your lessons after you decide what's important to teach? How many lessons do you really need to do that? And how do you actually create these lessons, right? So how do you decide what's important to teach? How do you order them? How many lessons do you really need? And, how do you create them? And this is something that you're going to optimize over time. It's not going to be just tomorrow you'll sit down and knock this whole thing out. It's an overtime thing, but it will make you a better teacher sitting down and actually thinking about this and then putting pen to paper or fingers to keys as you start working through this. So here's kind of how I took this journey 6 years ago when I was teaching. I looked at my 5 years or whatever it was prior to that and said, I've been doing this and I feel like every year I'm kind of reinventing the wheel and this is silly to me. Even though I know the content, I know when I should-ish teach it, but I decided to be much more intentional about it. So over the summer, it took me 1 week and I went into an empty classroom and I brought the book because our school was very bullish about the book and said, this is what you're teaching. And I said, okay. And so I did this alone, and I highly recommend it in groups. I think I've already said that, but and I do have pictures of this somewhere. I took pictures on my cell phone of what the final product kind of looked like. It was really fun, really gratifying. But find an empty classroom with as much room as you can. And if you have multiple whiteboards, that's even better. I had 2, kind of the main primary big whiteboard up in the front, and then I had a smaller side whiteboard that I could work on. And so I took the book, and before really opening it up, I sat down and thought, okay, let's do some backward design. What are my main projects that I want to complete through this school year? Not tests, not quizzes, big projects where students are working, collaborative, all that stuff. And I wrote those up on the board, on that side whiteboard, because I wanted to keep in mind that I did have an end in mind of students creating with the language. Once I had that, then I broke down the book. So I went chapter by chapter and just started writing out all the lessons, the grammar lessons, the vocab, and I didn't go crazy. It was, hey, chapter 1 talks about, introductions. Okay, cool. I didn't write, they use hola, que tal, and then, no, just introductions. And I did that for all the chapters. And so now what I have on the sideboard is kind of a big jumble, but then next to that is the projects I want to complete. Then on the front board, I broke that up into 4 sections, one for each quarter. So depending how your school works, one per trimester, however you want to, work out the time. Remember, we're talking about time delivery with synchronous versus asynchronous. So the timing is important. Then on that big board, I wrote down the projects that I wanted to complete in each quarter. So I have a project called Kien Soy, which is a very simple project, very first project students do, and that's describing themselves. And so that's in quarter one. And so, I went through each quarter, broke down all my projects. This is what I want students to create for each quarter. And then I went back to that sideboard and one by one started eliminating the lessons that I needed for each project. So for instance, like Kien Soy, I knew I needed regular AR verbs in the present tense, as well as ER and IR verbs, the regular present tense verbs. So made sure that went there. And once I did that, I could cross it off the list, off that sideboard. Slowly but surely, I went through all my lessons and filled out that whole board. And then I kind of, it was still a jumble because I just started throwing it up there. Then I was able to order those in an order that made sense to me. Now, over the years, that's changed because I found, hey, maybe I should teach this later. This goes first. But that was the experience for me. Again, can you do it a different way? Absolutely. If you have teams, it's going to look even different or more different. But have some fun with it because it's an enjoyable process, because what you're doing is you're planning out the student experience ahead of time rather than reactive in a synchronous way of, okay, I taught this today, now what should I teach tomorrow? You're going to go into the school year knowing the content order. Here's some reflection questions for you. How have you been ordering your content? How many lessons do you think you teach? And how do you view your course? Do you view it as the elephant, or do you view it as the bites? Also, do you change your order of content from year to year, or is it relatively consistent? Have you found the best order to your content? And what do you like, wish, wonder, and think about your content? I hope this helps, and good luck.